10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
University Loawe pia moyo mama ni ayo ufahamu watuya Siosiua Lafitani Professor Inoke Hu'akau pia Professor Dr. Siosiua Lafitani.
Welcome to each and every one of you to the Lo'au University. Welcome to Lo'au, our program, multimedia program, Lo'au and the World. And our specific topic for this evening is diplomacy among the Pacific Island nations, Australia, New Zealand, and China. I would like to firstly acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands here in Canberra, the Ngunnawal and the Ngāpuhi tribes, as well as the Taraku tribe in New South Wales, where my guest for this evening is residing, Professor Inoke Hu'akau, the Chancellor of the Lo'au University. I am from the Ma'ananga Canberra, and he's from the Ma'ananga Sydney. I would also like to acknowledge the Crown Prince of Tonga, the Bodo Aukalala and his family, as well as the Her Royal Highness, the High Commissioner of Tonga for Australia, Princess Latufuteka, and all political leaders here and in Tonga and in the Pacific, as well as other leaders, including religious leaders and all lineages who are watching and will be watching this program this evening. As I have mentioned, our topic is for us to discuss the nature and the current situation of diplomacy and the reality of the international and regional relations between the Pacific Island nations, Australia, New Zealand, and China, among others. Without further ado, I will pass on to Professor Hu'akau to start, and I will join him later on accordingly to some of his views. Thank you very much. Malo Inoke.
Siua, thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss this topic in Lo'au's media program, and allow me to acknowledge the similar salutation that you have offered in the program. And let me join by firstly simply stating my position, the position that I have held for a long time regarding the Pacific Islands and the world, especially most of the Western countries that have participated in aiding our countries, and so to the Asian countries recently. Simply, Siua, my view is that I'm very optimistic about the involvement of Asian countries, especially led by China and Japan and others in the Pacific region, in addition to New Zealand, Australia, and everything else, is especially the EU from Europe, and sometimes the United States of America. So I'm optimistic, very optimistic about this, but my optimism is based on about three important factors. The first one is that we have to refrain from the dominant media narrative of good countries, bad countries, evil countries, and so on. We have to refrain from that kind of narrative, which dominates our media landscape for sometimes regarding China or anybody else, right? Secondly, each country in the Pacific can only benefit from any aid from any country, regardless of from where, Australia, New Zealand, or China, Japan, and things like that, if they have a firm economical development program for their countries. Without a very steady development program for each of these countries in the long run, they cannot take advantage. We cannot fully have the advantage or benefit from the money that we have been aided by these countries, whether it's China, whether it is Australia. Right? And the third thing is that our sovereignty of these countries. The sovereignty of these countries, it is their responsibility individually to protect their sovereignty, right, of the island nation. Those are the three things that is very important for me in looking at the Pacific. But generally, I don't see any problem at all. If you have these three things in place, right? Refrain from the media dominant narrative of divisiveness, like good countries, bad countries, evil nation. It cannot help anybody. But it is very dangerous. And we know how dangerous this narrative is in the mess up in Europe they have done. Right? And but that is what I think. Those are the three things that I am thinking about, which is the basis of all countries in the region gaining some advantage or full benefit from from China, either from China, Japan, Australia, but I don't see any conflict at all, because if you carefully look at the way these countries ate Tonga, for example, and China and Japan and a lot and Asia concentrate on the infrastructure, right? The infrastructure program build up. Australia and New Zealand concentrate, and most of the Western concentrate on the services like health, education, our court system, and things like that, especially the jurisprudence branch of our countries. So I do not see, with that kind of division of the way they aid us, I do not see much conflict occurring regarding China, Japan, and Australia and New Zealand. But that's my position, on that issue.
Thank you, Malo Inoke, and it's very clear the 3 points that you have outlined in relation to what you have observed, the situation in the Pacific, among the islands, in conjunction with Australia, New Zealand, and China. So with the first point you mentioned, okay, we have to relook and re-explain again the media view of bad and good countries or superpowers. I think with that point, it has influenced and shaped and molded our view towards China and toward Russia. Some of the superpowers that are not inside the Western rim. Why we have to change, to deal with that first question, first point of yours. You said we have to relook at that, whether it's still valid for us to say Australia is good, America is good, China and Russia are bad. But according to some, and also some media experts, those characteristics or characters were a product of what China and Russia did in the past. And the question is, are they still doing the same thing today? And is America doing the same thing? We have to apply to America, to Britain as well. What about Australia and New Zealand in the Pacific? Can you dwell more into that, Inoke, because it's a very controversial issue. With the West, they talk about Russia and China as communist countries. Why? And not democratic. Freedom is not there, freedom of press, freedom of other aspects of life. Can you explain more on that first point of yours before we move to the second and the third? Yeah, thank you, Malo.
These are the kind of the media narratives, that I urge that we should refrain from. Right? We have to look carefully at the history of each country, and we can find anything. China has gone through a lot of problems, internal and also external. It has been invaded by Japan. Their history is not a happy one, right? But fortunately, I believe that when Mao comes in to China, what Mao did for China is to give China time from outside interference in its sovereignty to build up itself, right? And in that way, a lot of Chinese, although you have float around communist socialism and things like that, but they appreciated that move, because when there was internal conflict, United States and things like that going to China, Japan going to China, but fortunately in the recent years, Mao happened to keep China safe until it can develop itself. And that's why that Mao, whether we brand him as such communist or etc., etc. But he is important to his country. They appreciate it right now. And that's why the Mao has also become a very important, respected figure among the Chinese premier, right? Up to now, you go and see there. But there is a big question about blaming somebody as communist and blaming somebody as democratic, right? While you look inside the country, there are a lot of democratic principles they are practicing, see, right? The West do not dominate the word democratic, something like that. We have to look at it again. But the most important thing, we see these countries as they are now, right? As they are now. And we have to mold our attitude to a more refreshing type of attitude based on a new narrative, Siwa, right?
Okay.
Based on a new narrative, because
can I come in?
Yeah.
We can
Yeah.
talk about a new narrative regarding China and Russia. To take those two superpowers. But the fact is, I'm talking here. It's not my view, but I'm talking here from the Western media perspectives. The general view from the West. When China comes into the Pacific, on one hand, especially the Western perspective, we look at China as a communist. Is advanced economic and military power, superpower on one hand. On the other hand, it's still a communist. The same, likewise, in the situation of Russia. And you are right explaining that we have to move away from that kind of perspective toward China. But the fact is, for Western media and most people, China is still a communist. It's not a democratic and a very advanced nation. But with their communist political system, it's still very strong within. No difference in the case of China and Russia. What do you think of that? Because that's why people refer to them as bad country, though it's too narrow to label Russia and China in that respect. But that's why people look. That's how people from the West. How you can refrain from that. I mean, how you can share your idea to people to refrain from that traditional view of China.
Firstly, Siwa, I don't know of two countries that their policy is to promote a peaceful and stable world as China did. Also, Russia recently tried to promote a stable world with based on peace, right, and economic. It is different. The way they operate is different because they hope that there is no war because they are doing successfully. They are successfully, especially China, in peacetime. Right? We are trying to promote war between China and Taiwan. Right? Economically, Taiwan is one of the biggest trading partner of China, Korea, Japan. in the East. And where do this thing, war, politically, they have to the united one policy. We know that China come up with the one policy, China, one China policy, including Taiwan, right? But I don't think they want war with Taiwan if they want to. But slowly, slowly, Taiwan will work with China to promote peace and also economic development. And the economic relationship between these two countries is very, very strong, right? It's only the media that shout that China want to take over. Uh, China say that Taiwan is part of them. Okay, that's different. But to create a war in order to make Taiwan be part of China is not in China's interest, right? And it does not matter how the West say that, oh, they have to invade Taiwan and things like that. Uh, the Asian region, Siwa, is too smart for that because war cannot contribute anything positive among the way they are related to each other, right? That is why that we have to refrain from using the narrative that lead people to believe in a certain way, because it will affect, as well as if we take Tonga, for an example, Siwa, right? This kind of narrative will actually influence how people of Tonga see the Chinese in Tonga, right? And there are questions now that say, oh, we don't have Chinese people in Tongan people in Chinese, but we have community. And we forget that not the near past, we live under the rule of the British Empire is the most strongest of economic power, right? Then it is natural for us because they come into our region and we take language, English language as a second language. And we will lean to migrate to those English-speaking countries because we understand, right? We relate to it because English, we can speak English. So right now, we are building our communities in China, Japan, foremost, like football community in Japan. We have a lot of Tongan that study in Japan, and we have a lot of Tongan that study now in China, study Chinese. So we go into this area based on our relationship with their language-wise, slowly. But why we settle for the English-speaking countries? Because naturally, during the British Empire, we speak English, and we lean more toward migrating to these countries, especially as Australia, New Zealand, and the United States.
So you're saying, okay,
Right? So
okay,
the point is,
yeah, you're saying, if I'm right, Russia is bad, China is bad, America is good, Britain is good, but only because of us still hold on to our differences and not our commonalities. Is what you're saying?
yeah, we have some Chinese family in Tonga for a long time, right? We have some Chinese family in Tonga for a long time. Samoa, they also migrate from China when they seek a better country to develop. But a lot of Chinese are being recruited back into China now, and it has come into to the modern days of operating business-wise, right? It is the manufacturing or making good is dominated by China. The other countries, they have service industries like banking and things like that. But the production of whatever goods is still dominated by China now. China is the biggest production company in the world, country in the world, right?
Okay.
And if we refrain from this kind of divisive that does not help the attitude, internal attitude of each country's population toward China, we won't get the full benefit of economic might.
Okay, and you are so you're talking about
Because
here.
we have a very
So you're talking about here, you're talking
We have
about
a very
how we
suspicious
can
mindset.
benefit ourselves. You're talking here of how we're going to be benefit
yeah,
from China and Russia, for instance. And I think you have, in the beginning, you outlined, I would like us to go
Yes, you are.
to your second point, okay, because of time. I think in the beginning you outlined some very important distinction there between what the Western, especially Australia and New Zealand, are doing to us, to the Pacific Island nations, and what China is doing. You mentioned one important point that China, like China and Japan, they focus on the in helping our infrastructure. And on other social and political and educational levels, though China is coming to the education as well, but on the social, political, and educational, New Zealand and Australia, they come in more on that level. So we talk in Marxist terms on infrastructure here and superstructure. Let's put it this way. Australia and New Zealand, they focus on the superstructure. China focuses on the infrastructure. I would like us to come to your second point, okay? You mentioned the first point of to refrain from making judgment on bad and good. Can you talk more about the second point? I forgot your second point among the 3 points that I just want us tonight to talk about your 3 points. The second point, you mentioned your second, can you elaborate that again?
the second point, Siwa, the second point is that it's an internal decision making of these countries. But in order to benefit from any aid from countries, whether it's China, Japan, or Australia, or New Zealand, they have to have a very firm economic development plan for what they want, how they want their country to be developed.
Okay.
Right? And then the aid from other countries will be decided by your development plan. If you want to build an airport, enlarge the airport, right? Make a bigger airport, like what Samoa and Fiji did. You have to have a strong plan of what are you going to do with that big airport in the future of your development. Right? Then you decide. If you don't have a great objective for your future in developing, why build a very, very big airport for your little island? Right? That are the example of the issues you in case for Tonga.
Can you come in, okay, with,
I believe
okay, please, Can you relate that point to Tonga? Are we doing that? or not? Because it seems to me that
Yeah, for example,
China comes in and provide what they want to be built, not by us, but by them. Or maybe there was compromise between. Can you explain about the
no,
situation? Yeah.
China does not come in. China doesn't come in with a predetermined project
Okay.
for these islands.
Okay.
It is them who apply to China for these projects. What I mean, Siosiua, is that if you don't have a clear plan for the development of your island nation to the future, you cannot benefit at all. It doesn't matter whether it's from Australia or from New Zealand, but we have to have a clear vision of our future and the way we develop our future. For example, Siwa, I say in the case of Tonga, right? Tonga is a natural hub for air travel. It is a natural hub due to its position, its geographic location. We have all the island to the other side, and then all Tahiti and Niue, Rarotonga to our other side, right? And the best way is that if we have a good airport, if we ask China for a good airport, we have a plan to make Tonga a hub in the future for air travel. That's, for example, that I'm talking about. You have to have the infrastructure and a clear vision of what that will do for your country in the future, right? We are the natural hub in the Pacific, not Samoa, not Fiji. But New Zealand tried to be the natural hub for Pacific Island, right? And every time you travel sometimes, you have to go past Tonga, back to New Zealand, to come back to Tonga, if you go from Fiji. Only recently, we started to have Fiji airline. But in order to be a natural hub, you have a lot of benefit with other countries. Then it's easy to link to Hawaii, United States, if we build a hub in Tonga, where people can travel there and then disperse to go to Fiji, to go to Rarotonga, to go to Niue on the other side, right? It will be cheaper for air travel if we make Tonga a natural hub. But do we have a plan in our economic development to be a natural hub? No. And we are not encouraged to do so by other countries, especially New Zealand and Australia. Our chance to build that is with China, because this is the kind of infrastructure that China can assist Tonga with, right? But
are you saying, okay, you know, with that regard, okay, are you saying Australia and New Zealand, they have helped us but confine us on just one side without allowing us to be more cosmopolitan and more international in nature, as China is trying to do with us? Are you saying that was the case?
Yes, yes, you are. That's the reason, and the development of our fishing industry, right? We have to have a plan incorporating these sources of wealth and a plan for the future of its development, right? For fishing industry, we have more sea area than land. Not so much, right? We only see Japan come and do research in Tonga and things like that. But no country has aided us to develop.
Japan has done that.
Yeah. And all what we are doing, Siwa, is to sell license for other countries to come and fish in our water, right? And there is a history of the Americans. They have interfere in this one to grant license unlimited something I don't know, but I heard they come in fishing industries and interfere with the right of these territorial right, economic territorial right of a lot of countries in the South Pacific. And if we don't plan our development, that is what happened. We only sell license, right? How much license per year? And they come and scoop up millions of dollars of worth of the wealth of from our seas, right? We have to start to think and plan, have a very good economic development plan for our country. And
Okay.
I am optimistic that this is the kind of government that we have now can do that for us, right? We have the people that can do that for us at the
Okay.
moment, but we have to make a development, long-term development plan.
Okay. Before we move in to your third point, because I also would like to talk about other related issues, especially to the current situation of diplomacy among the Pacific Island nations, China, Australia, and New Zealand. The last point I would like you to comment on, okay, it seems and it sounds that we, the Pacific Islands, what we do is to develop plan to prepare everything for these great powers or superpowers to come in and fund without any financial protection or finance from outside. So it seems there is one side, Pacific Island nations, prepare a plan for the donors to come and fund. It wasn't the case before, 30, 40 years ago. Now, it sounds and it appears to be the case from now, maybe onwards. We don't know when it will stop and when it will still continue. We, island nations, can't produce any finance platform to fund what we want, what is our plan, what development we want. It seems that what we are doing and will continue doing is to plan things, beautiful plan for these people to come, and they come, Australia, New Zealand, China comes, and they take over the funding process. Can you comment on that before we move to your third point? Okay. I'm not sure whether I'm clear on that, but I would like you to add into, Professor Ipeli Awofa said that's our main weakness. Yeah? Is for us to rely on foreign aids. And he really
Yes.
stood against it. Yeah?
Siwa, we have been on the receiving end of this for a long time, for some times now, right? We feel comfortable in getting any money for whatever reason coming into our pocket, right? Our economy. I don't see much that we can have our plan, and then we have to allow the development based on funding by other countries to come in specifically tailored to fit what we have in our development plan, right? And if it does not fit with our requirement for our development plan, we have to seek someone else right? We have to seek some money. But there is plenty of money there, Siwa, available from a lot of countries. But we have to tailor-make our plan, economic plan, and stick to it, right? And see which funding from what country can fit in to our development plan. And then we accept. We just don't sit there and say thank you, right, for the money pouring in, because sometimes you don't know what they use it for, right? For most of for Tonga, sometimes money pouring in, and we keep increasing salary, right? With it.
So are
There is
you
no building, there is no development.
Are you saying, okay, we are doing that, and we will continue with that? With we like the consumers. We consume the production from the producers. They are donors. Are you saying? Do you think? I think I have to put it. Do you think that's the best thing for us to continue doing? For us, because there are a lot of money to be poured into us, for us to keep on consuming and using money from those producers, that they produce the finance to fund our local developments. Do you think it's a good thing for us to continue doing that, or we have to look at other things for us to be the consumer and the producers at the same time?
Sure. If you don't have a very firm economic development plan, long term, what you are doing is that you only become a consumer, right? Not a developer, not a builder. Right? They will give fund to make sure that you consume, that you are a consumer returning their help, right?
So there's exchange there.
Money. Yeah, there's an exchange here. To return their aid money, the good, simple way for you is to be a consumer. Because you don't have a long-term economic plan to build your lifestyle, to enhance the wealth of your country, right? We give you money, that's okay. But we give you money and you buy things from us, right? Because without a solid economic plan for the long term, I don't see us getting any benefit or full advantage of the amount of money that pouring in from other countries to our country. Right? We have to have a sure-footed development plan, because at the moment we don't. Most of the countries in the South Pacific don't.
So what you're saying, okay, we have to move from just consumers of within these economic and social development to become producers by trying to exchange in developing what we plan, and we have exchanged and compromise with them to do, for them to do for us.
Yes, we have to move. We have to move away from consuming kapaika, tin fish, to producing tin fish. Right? We have the feasibility of certain project. We have to look at it carefully. But the point is, without a solid, firm economic development plan,
okay,
you can't get any advantage from the money pouring in. Because if China comes in to build an airport for Tonga, right? You should have in your plan, what are you developing the big airport for? Why are you extending your runway to accommodate 747 or bigger airplane. You have a long-term plan because you are trying to develop Tonga as a NATO hub for air travel. Right? And that's the only example I can. It may be because we have built ourselves some years back to be a seafaring navigation company, right? Shipping. We dwell into the shipping industry. We did successfully in the shipping industry. But it gets to a point where that kind of, we need a specialized skill staff to run a shipping company, right?
Thank you, Inoke.
Captain and engineers. Yeah,
I think you have
run a shipping company.
Yeah, you have made that those few points very clear. I would like us, Inoke, because we have 13 minutes left to move on. There is this current situation where Wang Li, the foreign minister of China, is in the Pacific, moving from one island to another, including Tonga. Here is Pen Yong, is the foreign minister of Australia. She has left Tonga today. She travels there 3 times to the islands within 2 weeks. For me, there is a question of diplomacy, a crisis of diplomacy happening. What do you think of this situation now? You mentioned you are optimistic of what's going on, and you see there is no clash between the coming of China and Australia and New Zealand. It very obvious. China was with the Solomon Islands a month ago trying to negotiate to make compromise in certain things. Now foreign Wang Li is there, Pen Yong is there. How will you look? Do you think what is going on is an aftermath of the failure of Australia, New Zealand, USA, and Britain to look after us, or that's how things going today? For China to come in and start to have a strong foothold in the islands, especially Tonga and now Papua New Guinea, the Solomon. How you look at that? Do you think is a failure of the diplomacy among Australia, New Zealand, the Western nations with the islands, with us? Or is that just how things going with this global and cosmopolitan power of China dispersing worldwide with no barriers, no obstacles to stop them?
Siua, we have to think about there is no single country that can satisfy the need for development of the whole region, right? Whether it's China or New Zealand, Australia, or Europe, right? There is no single country that can do that. But if the Eastern nation try to come in and participate, they should be welcome, Siwa, right? They should be welcome to participate because there is not a single country, take for example Australia, that can satisfy the needs for development of all the island nations, right? No, we have to move out from that. and accommodate other countries that want to come in and help, and where they do their help, right? In what they help. And then we can supplement each other requirement. To say that, oh, stop that, the influencer, they come in to control. No. If we look at the history of this country, they don't come in to intervene in the internal affairs or sovereignty of your country. No. There is no evidence for that. Asking you to repay your loan is not to come and interfere with the sovereignty of your country. Right? It's your fault for not paying it, for getting a loan which is not inside and according to your development plan. So you borrow too much or you borrow too little. That's not the concern of the China, either as China or Australia or New Zealand or the EU nation. That's your responsibility. Right? But it's about time that the Pacific take over the requirement for their the responsibility for being a sovereign state. Right? We still have time and it does not affect us like everything else. But we have to accommodate more help when they comes in. But like I said, if you don't have a solid economic plan for the future, you don't know where to put the money in. All you know is to consume it, right? In salaries, in different things, instead of a development plan. That's my point, Siwa, the basic point that because we have to realize that China alone cannot put every country in the Pacific. Australia alone cannot do it. Or any individual country does not have the capacity to do this. But that is why the region should welcome equally partners for different things they want according to their plan, economic plan. For that, I don't see a problem. I don't really see a problem.
So you don't,
because if
Inoke, you don't see, Inoke, you talking from the economic, the social, the material sides of development. You don't see, I mean, for Australia, they said, our leaders, I mean, they said our national security, our national interests are in crisis because of the Chinese influence. And China, on one hand, said it's their national security and national interest. Can you explain that, Noke, apart from the social, economic, educational, and the material development, when we look from that side, it's okay. When we go to other side of, they have national interest and national security reasons for coming in. China said it's for their national security. How on earth they come here to us here and said their national security is in here, not in China? Can you? I think, you know, if you can touch on that and wind up the whole program, please. Thank you,
Mara. National security is different from sovereignty. Yeah.
Okay.
Sovereignty, you have your economic zone. National security, we are looking at a bigger area contained beyond your borders, right? Theoretically, beyond your borders, to give you sometimes to respond if there is a threat, right, of invasion or things like that. And you can throw your national security area much larger than you saw, about 2,000 miles from your border. Australia can do that too. And they can negotiate just like the economic zone, right? The economic zone of Pacific countries, there are some countries, they are close to each other. So they don't have the free 200 miles nautical miles between them.
So
But
are
they
you
decided
are you
to
saying
like it.
are you saying okay, only China and Australia have national security here? What about the national security of Tonga if we talk about that in the same sense?
Yes, it can be accommodated, Siwa. But the national security, what security that China need to prevent Tonga from invading, right? China. We started to discuss these issues here because we don't need the security such as the atomic power needs security. For us, it is not a big issue for us. Our national security is okay, but our sovereignty is the thing that we stay with. Realistically, we are talking about our sovereignty because national security is being discussed by countries which had the capability to destroy someone else. Right?
Okay, okay. So
So,
in that respect we have sovereignty, but no
yeah,
no national security.
yeah,
So are you saying we have sovereignty, but only the superpower Australia can destroy us, so they have national security and national interest? Interestingly,
even
yeah,
Australia cannot destroy anybody. China can,
yeah.
right?
Australia can't
Even
destroy.
Australia is not
Not capable, not
one
capable
thing
of. Yeah, I understand.
yeah, one thing that I have to mention about the Solomon Island issue, right?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Australia worry about the Solomon Island issue. Australia has leased to China one airport and one harbor in Australia.
Okay.
Then what are you talking about the Solomon? What? If you allow China to lease an airport in Darwin and a harbor, what kind of two faces that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right. It's very muddy as you are.
Anyway. By the way, okay, can you summarize the whole session, whole program, and I think will be enough for tonight. Yeah.
You are, but like I talked about, we have to take up the responsibility to develop our own country. We don't live in this age by accepting money for whatever purpose, right? Flowing in,
Okay.
and you have no plan at all of development.
Okay, please. Can you also add in your third point in that summary, please? Because we couldn't we couldn't reach to the third point of yours before. Okay, yeah.
Because you have to tie up your economic plan with your sovereignty, right? To see if it come in that weaken your sovereignty of your country, you have to look and you have to know it firsthand and come in. Because we heard of something called regime change, where outside countries go in and help some people to make a coup about because they don't like the leader or something like that. It's all over the world, Siwa. And we have to be very careful in protecting our sovereignty. For Tonga, our kingdom, right? What would be best for Tonga as a kingdom of Tonga, as a monarchy? It will not be the same as the requirement of Samoa and Fiji, right? It won't be the same. But if we try to maintain our sovereignty, we have to be very careful with the political thing that we have to bring in to our country. We have to be very, very smart and careful, right? In what element of democratic rule that we get to our country, how many democratic principle we have been, and because we have been adopting the democratic principle for a long time, since we put in our constitution, right? But the sovereignty issue, I can add it as a fourth point, but it tie in with the kind of development plan that we have, economically and politically. Right? But my point, Siwa, is that it is a must. We must have a long-term development plan for our country in order to benefit from any. We don't care about, we try our best to refrain from the dominant media narrative that is around now of, say, evil empire, bad country, good country. We try to refrain from that. And then we will live peacefully. And regionally, Siwa, may I add this point? We have to think now about the principle of neutrality for the region, right? Then it will help us to cope with the differences that some countries try to trump up as a difference. But Europe, Switzerland has been neutral for a lot of time, for a long time. Why not the Pacific Island region to function as a neutral region in the world, right? We have to entertain that kind of thinking. How feasible is it to be done?
Is that the new gravity you're talking about? Is that the new gravity, you're talking about?
Neutrality. Neutrality. We can take whatever, but we are not participating in any militarization of any region, of our region.
It's like what the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea said today. Friends with everyone, enemies with no one. That's how to boast the fourth foreign policy of neutrality. Yeah.
Yeah, then we will avoid this kind of competing type of interest that comes in to our region. But the main thing, Siwa, if we don't have an firm economic plan, it is very unfortunate at this time. Right? You remember that our king has related to this kind of issue not long time back. But we have to sit down and draw a plan. Right? Then we can avoid this kind of program, this kind of narrative coming to our region. Right? China has, I think Samoa, Fiji has a lot of loan from China. Tonga is still, what do you call it? Sidestepping around its loan from China. But as see what China put its loan infrastructure as a separate bank. Right?
Do you think, Noke, China has made up that loan structure to easily suck in the islands into their umbrella? Because Australia, New Zealand,
No.
they don't have that. They don't have that loan structure of loaning 100, 200 million dollars from the islands.
No, Siwa.
Yeah.
No, Siwa. No. China doesn't come in and dictate the amount you loan.
But they allow it. They allow
You.
They allow us to loan as much
They
as we
can
can.
help.
Yeah. Allow the money
They
for
just
us.
facilitate the borrowing.
Okay.
Yeah, they just facilitate the
They
borrowing.
facilitate it. Okay.
Depends on what you think about your country, what your country needs. As there is a former Minister of Finance of Greece. Remember that a few years back, Greece gone bankrupt,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
And they put in this guy, Yanis Farkas, I think, to be the new prime minister, right? For their recovery. The prime minister, the finance minister, go in and see what the government of Greece did, right? He looked through all the borrowing and agreement and contract and things like that with China, and he realized that he cannot honor them, right? So he was withdrawing whatever contract he thinks that is unfair, and fly to China. See what? This is the way he put on a YouTube. I have to send it on YouTube. When he get there, sit opposite Xi Jinping, right? and discuss what he came up for, right? All the contract and things that his country cannot offer, and he like to negotiate them to restructure everything, right? What he say is that the response from China, I never experienced it in my life when I live with Western countries, right? Xi Jinping simply say, is that all you want? And Yanis say, yes, for the time being. Xi Jinping said, grab everything according to what Yanis wants. Because the policy is that for you to survive economically, and you can pay us back economically, right? But this finance minister experience is what China is doing, right? The amount of China investment in the Silk Road project, right?
Thank you, Noke. I think that's a clear example of what China is doing, and it relates to what you mentioned before, that China is trying to promote and maintain peace in its own way, by using his power, his superpower in various ways, and the last example there verifies what you have been sharing with our audience. Malo Professor Inoke, thank you very much for what you have prepared and shared with our audience tonight, and Malo Apito for everything, and Malo for each and every one of you watching and will be watching this program in the future. Maofalahayatu, And Malo mo mea mai, we'll talk to you later. Malo abito noke,
Malo
Polia,
Siosiua.
iyo,
Malo.
Malo abito.